There's a kind of pain the body carries as a scar, and the soul keeps as silence. 70 lashes for a piece of bread, 70 reasons for the world to turn its back. But there's also a kind of gaze that doesn't waver, a gesture without words that says, "You are not alone." This is the story of two wounded souls who discovered, amidst the dust and grit of a forgotten town, that starting over doesn't require perfection, just the courage to accept an outstretched hand. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The sun rose slowly over the town of Harmony Creek, painting the adobe houses and empty corrals in hues of orange. The air still held the coolness of dawn, but it would soon be swallowed by the dry heat that cracked the earth. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and where secrets lasted less than a bad harvest. Tomas Ferreira woke before the roosters, as always. He put the kettle on low heat, made the weak coffee he had left, and sat at the worn wooden table. The house was small, clean, but far too empty. 2 plates on the shelf, a pair of boots by the door. A rocking chair still on the porch, as if waiting for someone who would never return. He was 38, but looked 10 years older, his sun-weathered face, calloused hands, broad shoulders bowed by years of hard work. A widower for 6 years, ever since Clara died of fever during the worst drought the region had ever seen. Tomas never allowed himself to cry in front of anyone. He kept his pain like he kept his tools, locked away, useful only when needed. The small farm he ran was modest, 12 acres of tired land, 3 scrawny cows, an old horse, and a garden that stubbornly persisted. He sold milk, fresh cheese and firewood at the Saturday market. It was barely enough to cover expenses, but he never owed anyone anything. Not pride, but dignity that he held onto. On the other side of town, at the edge where the dirt road met the scrub brush, stood a shack of old planks and cracked roofing. That's where Helena lived. No one knew her last name, no one asked. She had appeared in the area months ago, too thin, too quiet, asking for odd jobs from house to house. She washed clothes, carried water, picked corn. She accepted anything. She received little or nothing. Helena was 26, but her skin already showed the signs of a life exposed to sun and hunger. Her dark hair, pulled back in a tight bun, revealed a high forehead and deep-set eyes, brown like wet earth. She always wore the same faded dress, mended at the shoulders. Her hands were slender, but marked by poorly healed cuts. She didn't talk much, not because she was rude, but because she'd learned words could be used against her. In the shack where she lived as a favor, property of a certain Jacinto, a man of land and strong opinions, she paid her rent in services. But the rent never seemed to get paid off. That morning, Helena woke with her stomach churning. She hadn't eaten since the day before. She had 3 potatoes stashed in an old tin can and a piece of brown sugar candy. Nothing more. She thought about borrowing from the neighbor, but she already owed too much. She thought about waiting until the next day, when she could pick some ears of corn from a farmer who let the poor glean the leftovers. But her body wouldn't hold out. That's when she saw, from the shack window, the baker's wagon passing slowly down the street. The smell of fresh bread hit her like a stab. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made the decision that would change everything. Tomas was mending the fence near the road when he heard the shouts. First one, then several. Angry voices, indignant, filled with that morbid excitement that only another person's misfortune awakens. He dropped his hammer and walked to where he could see. In the middle of the yard in front of Anselmo's general store, Helena was on her knees, her hands tied behind her back, her dress torn at the shoulders, and beside her, whip in hand, stood Jacinto, a large man with a thick moustache and an authoritarian voice. 70! Jacinto yelled to the small crowd gathering. 70 as the town law dictates. Those who steal, pay. Helena wasn't crying. She was just trembling. Her body hunched, her breathing shallow. Tomas felt something tighten in his chest. He knew that kind of silence. It was the silence of someone who no longer expected mercy. The first lash cut the air. Helena moaned softly but didn't scream. The second came right after, then the third. Tomas clenched his fingers on the wood of the fence until he felt splinters digging into his skin. He didn't look away. He couldn't. The others turned their heads or whispered amongst themselves. But Tomas stayed there, immobile, a silent witness to an injustice no one dared to interrupt. By the time they reached the 70th lash, the sky began to darken. Heavy clouds covered the sun, and the wind brought the scent of rain. Jacinto threw the whip on the ground, spat to the side, and said loudly, "Let this be a lesson." Helena was untied. She stumbled as she got up, but accepted no help from anyone. She wrapped her arms around her shoulders, lowered her head, and began to walk back to the shack. Each step seemed an immense effort. Tomas waited until everyone had dispersed. Then, slowly, he walked back home. But something in him had changed. Perhaps it was her gaze, lost, but still resilient. Perhaps it was the memory of Clara, who had died without him being able to do anything. Perhaps it was simply the straightforward conviction that no one deserves to be forgotten in their own pain. That night, he couldn't sleep. The early morning brought a fine, persistent rain. Tomas got up early, as always, but this time he didn't just make his own coffee. He set aside 3 loaves of bread he'd bought the day before, wrapped them in a clean cloth, and put them in a burlap sack. He added a piece of fresh cheese and 2 oranges. It wasn't much, but it was what he had. He put on his straw hat and walked down the muddy road to Helena's shack. The place looked even more miserable up close. The roof caved in on one side, a crooked door, a window without glass covered by a piece of tarp. Tomas left the sack leaning against the doorstep, knocked lightly on the wood, and walked away before anyone could open it. He didn't want explanations. He didn't want gratitude. He just wanted her to know that someone cared. Helena woke to the sound of rain drumming on the tin roof. Every muscle in her body ached. Her back burned as if it was still on fire. She could barely move, but hunger gnawed at her more than the pain. She dragged herself to the door, expecting to find only mud and silence. That's when she saw the bag. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake or a trap. But when she opened it and saw the bread, the cheese, the fruit, her hands began to tremble, not from fear, from something she no longer knew how to name. She sat on the damp ground, still inside the shack, and ate slowly. Each bite of bread seemed to return a sliver of the humanity that had been ripped from her. When she finished, she wrapped herself in the thin blanket she owned, and for the first time in a long time, cried. She didn't know who had left it, but she knew that for an instant she wasn't completely alone. 2 days later, Helena was hauling water from the community well when she saw Tomas fixing the fence near the road. He worked in silence, focused, his movements precise and economical. She hesitated. She didn't know if she should approach. She didn't know if he wanted to be seen, but gratitude weighed on her. She walked towards him, stopping about 10 feet away. Tomas looked up, but didn't stop hammering. "Thank you," Helena said, her voice raspy. He just nodded, a brief gesture, almost imperceptible. "You didn't have to," she continued. "I know," he replied, still not looking directly at her. "But I wanted to." Silence. The wind rustled the trees around them. "Why?" Helena asked, her voice barely audible. Tomas finally stopped. He wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his belt and faced her. There was something in his gaze, not pity, not sympathy, just recognition. "Because I know what it's like to go hungry," he said simply, "and because no one deserves to be whipped for trying to survive." Helena felt her eyes sting. She lowered her head, clutching the bucket against her body. "People will talk," she murmured. "They always do," Tomas replied, returning to his work. "Let them." She stood there for another moment, unsure what to say. Then slowly, she resumed her walk back to the shack. But something inside her was beginning to shift. It wasn't hope yet, but it was a crack, letting a sliver of light in. In the following weeks, Tomas continued to leave small gestures: a sack of flour, dry firewood, a wool blanket that had belonged to Clara but that he couldn't look at anymore without his chest tightening. He never spoke of it, and Helena never asked. But she began to reciprocate in the only way she knew how, mending the shirts he hung on the line, sweeping the area in front of his house when she passed by early on the road, leaving wildflowers on his doorstep. They were small gestures, silent, but they carried immense weight. The village, of course, began to notice. Saturday market day was the pulsating heart of Santo Antonio da Serra. There, amidst the vegetable stalls, sacks of beans and live chickens circulated not just goods, but gossip. That indeed was the most valuable currency in the village. It was at the market that Mrs. Inés, wife of the most prosperous merchant in the region, saw Tomas and Helena talking near the cheese stand. It wasn't anything significant. He was selling, she was buying with the few coins she'd saved from doing laundry. But for Mrs. Inés, it was enough. "Did you see that?" she said, loud enough for the other women to hear. "The widowers now running around with the woman who got whipped." The word spread like wildfire through dry grass. By the end of the day, half the village knew that Tomas was shacking up with Helena. The other half invented even worse details. Helena heard the whispers as she walked down Main Street. She felt the heavy stares, the malicious smiles, the doors closing as she approached. She knew that kind of judgment. She'd faced it before, in other places, for other reasons, but this time it hurt differently. Because this time someone was being dragged down with her. That night, she went to Tomas's house. She knocked with her knuckles, hesitant. He opened the door, surprised. "I need to talk to you," Helena said, her voice firm despite her fear. Tomas stepped aside. She entered but stayed near the door, as if ready to flee at any moment. "They're talking," she began. "About me, about you. They're saying things." "I know," Tomas said calmly. "Then you know this will hurt you," Helena continued, her eyes glistening. "You're respected here. You have a name. You have land. I'm nobody. I have nothing, and if they keep seeing us together, they'll destroy you too." Tomas crossed his arms, leaning against the table. "And what do you want me to do?" he asked, not with anger, but with simple curiosity. "Stop," Helena said, her voice trembling. "Stop helping me. Stop talking to me. I'll leave. I'll go to another town, another place, far away from here." "You want to leave?" he asked. Helena hesitated. "No," she admitted softly, "but it's the right thing to do." Tomas sighed. He walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. "I've lost a lot in my life, Helena," he said slowly. "I lost my wife. I lost the harvest. I lost whole years just trying to get by. And you know what I learned? That other people's opinions don't feed anyone. They don't warm anyone. They don't save anyone." He turned to her. "You're not nobody. You're someone fighting to live. And so am I. And if that bothers people, that's their problem." Helena felt tears stream down her face. "But I'm scared," she whispered. "Scared you'll regret this. Scared it will end badly. Scared of trusting and being abandoned again." Tomas took a step forward. "I can't promise it'll be easy," he said. "But I promise you one thing. As long as you want to stay, you have a place. Here, with me, and no one's going to chase you off." She clutched her shawl to her chest, trembling. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you care?" Tomas smiled sadly. "Because someone needed to," he replied. "And because for the first time in years, so do I." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where two wounded souls recognize the same battle in each other. Helena wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I don't know if I can believe that," she admitted. "You don't have to believe it now," Tomas said. "You just have to stay. The rest we'll figure out together." She nodded slowly. Then, without another word, she left through the door and disappeared into the night. But for the first time, she wasn't running away. She was just going home. The following days brought a new routine. It wasn't something planned, but something that simply happened, like when rain softens the earth and seeds begin to sprout without anyone needing to order them. Helena began to help Tomas on the farm. At first, it were small tasks, fetching water, sweeping the yard, feeding the chickens, but soon she found herself planting collard greens alongside him, mending the barn roof, separating milk to make cheese. Tomas, in turn, taught her, not with many words, but by showing how to tie a secure knot, how to choose the right wood to fix a fence, how to adjust the hoe so it wouldn't strain her back. He had patience, the patience of someone who learned everything on his own and knows that time is the best teacher. One afternoon, while they were peeling cassava, sitting in the shade of the mango tree, Helena asked, "Have you always lived here?" "Born here," Tomas replied. "My father owned this land. When he died, it passed to me." "And your wife?" He paused. Helena feared she had crossed a line. "Clara," he said finally. "She was from here too. We married young. She died in the drought 6 years ago. Fever. There was no medicine that could hold it." "I'm sorry," Tomas shrugged. "Life goes on," he said. "Not by choice, but because there's no other way." Helena looked at her own hands, stained with dirt. "I've lost people too," she murmured. "But in a different way." "Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, then she shook her head. "Not yet." "That's all right," Tomas said. "When you're ready." And he truly didn't push. It was one of the things Helena appreciated most about him. Tomas never forced locked doors. At night, after a simple dinner, beans, rice, fried egg, Tomas began to read aloud. He had few books, an old Bible, an almanac, and a worn-out novel that Clara had loved. He chose the almanac, thinking it would be more neutral. Helena listened, sitting in the rocking chair he'd insisted she use. His voice was deep, measured, with a heavy accent, but there was something comforting in that sound. She closed her eyes and, for the first time in years, felt safe. When he finished the chapter, she murmured, "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me what it's like to be home." Tomas didn't answer. He just smiled faintly, putting the book away. But not everything was peace. The village continued to whisper. Mrs. Inez spread that Helena was taking advantage of Tomas. Jacinto, still resentful from the bread incident, said she was a bad influence. And the priest, Father Simon, an old conservative man, began to preach about the importance of decency and good morals. One Sunday after Mass, the priest called Tomas aside. "My son," he said, his voice stern, "I know you are a good man, but I must warn you. This woman, she has a bad reputation, and you, a respected widower, should not associate with someone like that." Tomas felt anger rise, but he contained it. "With all due respect, Father," he said firmly, "Mrs. Helena works honestly, and if you knew her story, perhaps you would judge less." "Honest work doesn't erase past sins," the priest retorted. "And Christian charity shouldn't include judgment," Tomas replied. "Good day, Father." And he left, leaving the old priest stunned. That night, Helena noticed Tom seemed quieter than usual. She made some chamomile tea and placed the mug in front of him. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," he lied. "Tom," he sighed. "People won't stop talking," he admitted. "And I don't know how long this will go on." Helena sat beside him. "If you want me to leave—" "No," he interrupted, firm. "It's not that. Just, I wish it were easier." She touched his hand, lightly. "Nothing worth having is easy," she said. "You taught me that." Tom looked at her, surprised. "I did? Every day," Helena replied, smiling faintly. And in that moment, under the dim lamplight, they both understood that what they were building was more than just a friendship. It was roots. And roots aren't easily pulled up. The turn of the season brought cold winds and long nights. Tom woke one morning with a scratchy throat and a heavy body. He ignored it. There were fences to mend, firewood to split, milk to milk. He couldn't stop. But on the third day, the fever hit. Helena noticed when he stumbled carrying a bucket. She dropped what she was doing and ran to him. "You're burning up," she said, touching his forehead. "I'm fine," Tom grumbled, pulling away. "No, you're not. Get inside, now." He wanted to argue, but his body wouldn't obey anymore. Helena helped him to the bed, took off his boots, and covered him with 2 blankets. Then she ran out. She went to the house of Mrs. Gable, the oldest midwife in the village, who also knew about herbs and charms. She knocked on the door, breathless. "I need help," Helena said. "Tom's got a high fever." Mrs. Gable, a short woman with white hair and sharp eyes, assessed her from head to toe. "You're looking after him, are you?" she asked, without malice. "Yes," Helena replied, not looking away. "Then come. I'll show you what to do." She placed cold compresses on Tom's forehead. She made chicken broth and fed him spoonful by spoonful, even when he grumbled that he didn't need it. At night, when the fever worsened and he started to ramble, she didn't leave his side. She sat by the bed, held his hand, and began to sing. It was a simple lullaby her mother used to sing when she was a child. She didn't remember all the words, but the melody was still there, stored somewhere in her chest. Tom, though unconscious, seemed to calm down. His breathing became more regular, his tense face relaxed. Helena kept singing until her own voice gave out from exhaustion. The next morning, the fever had broken. Tom woke up weak, but lucid. The first thing he saw was Helena, curled up in the chair beside the bed, sleeping in an uncomfortable position. He tried to sit up, but the movement woke her. "You're better," she said, relieved. "You stayed here all night?" "Where else would I be?" she replied simply. Tom felt something stir within him. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something bigger, something he thought he'd buried with Clara. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "You don't need to thank me," Helena replied, adjusting the blanket over him. "It's what you do." "Not everyone does," Tom said. She smiled tiredly. "Then it's good I'm not everyone." She fed the animals, tended the garden, even tried milking the cow. With disastrous results they'd both laugh about later. Mrs. Gable showed up on the third day to check on the patient. "He's improving," she said, satisfied. "Thanks to her care." Tom looked at Helena, who was arranging firewood near the stove. "She's good at this," he said. "She is," Mrs. Gable agreed. "And you, my boy, are lucky to have someone like that around." She stood to leave, but before going, she leaned in and whispered in Tom's ear, "People will talk no matter what, so you'd better do what your heart tells you, not what other people's mouths say." And she left, leaving Tom thoughtful. That night, feeling better already, Tom sat at the table while Helena prepared dinner. He watched her, the way she moved around the kitchen, the concentration on her face, the delicate way she cut the potatoes. "Helena," he called. "I don't know what I would have done without you these past few days." She stopped, knife in the air. "You would have managed," she said, trying to sound casual. "No," Tom said seriously. "I wouldn't have. And I want you to know it's not just gratitude I'm feeling." Helena turned to him, her heart racing. "Then what is it?" Tom took a deep breath. "I'm still trying to figure it out," he admitted. "But I know it's important, and that I don't want to lose it." She felt her eyes sting. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to him. "I don't want to lose it either," she whispered. And there, in the simple kitchen under the yellow lamplight, they both understood that what they were building was more than friendship. It was refuge. It was healing. It was a new beginning. Tom's recovery brought a new lightness to their routine. He returned to work, but now Helena was always nearby, not as a helper, but as a partner. They worked side by side, talked more, laughed at small things. The village continued to talk, but they had both learned to ignore it. Until one Saturday afternoon, everything changed. Helena had gone to the market to buy salt and sugar. She was at Mrs. Julia's stall, the vendor, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Helena?" She froze. She turned around slowly, and there in the middle of the market was him, August. Tall, thin, with a cold gaze, the man she had tried to forget for years. "I thought you were dead," he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "What do you want?" Helena asked, her voice low but firm. "Just settling some business around here," August replied casually. "And imagine my surprise when I heard you were around. Living on charity, they say. Getting beaten, they say." He took a step forward. "Still the same loser, aren't you?" Helena clutched the basket to her chest. "Go away, August." "Go away?" He laughed. "I just came to remind you that you can't run from what you did, from who you are." The people around them began to pay attention. Helena felt her blood run cold. "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice trembling. "No?" August crossed his arms. "Then why did you run? Why did you abandon everything? Why did you leave the child you killed?" The words fell like stones. Helena felt the world spin. Around her, the whispers began. People drew closer, curious, eager. "I didn't kill anyone," Helena said, desperate. "He died of fever. I tried to save him. You were a mother," August cut in venomously, "and you failed. And that's why you ran, like a coward." Helena stumbled. Tears began to stream down her face. She dropped the basket and ran. She ran down the road, through the fields, until she reached the cabin. She locked herself inside and collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Tom heard about it from Mrs. Marta, who showed up at the ranch with a worried look on her face. "Something happened at the market," she said, "with Helena. A man showed up, said terrible things. She ran off." Tom didn't wait to hear more. He ran to the shack and banged on the door. "Helena, open up!" Silence. "Helena, please, let me in." The door opened slowly. Helena was sitting on the floor, her face swollen from crying. Tom stepped inside and knelt in front of her. "What happened?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "Helena," he said, taking her hands, "you can tell me. Whatever it is, I want to know." She took a shaky breath. "I had a son," she began, her voice cracking. 4 years ago. His name was Miguel. He was small, fragile, born with weak lungs. I tried to take care of him. I tried everything, but he didn't make it. He died at 6 months." She sobbed. "And my husband, Augusto, blamed me. Said I was a bad mother, that I didn't know how to care for him, that I let our son die. He hit me, kicked me out of the house, spread rumors that I was a murderer. I ran far away, where no one knew me. But he found me." Tom felt his chest tighten. He pulled Helena into a hug, holding her tight. "You didn't kill anyone," he said firmly. "You tried to save him, and no one has the right to blame you for something that wasn't in your control." "But people will believe him," Helena cried. "They always believe the worst." "Let them," Tom said. "I don't. And that's what matters." Helena clung to him like a drowning person to a life raft. And there, in the miserable shack, Tom made a silent promise. No one would hurt Helena as long as he was alive. Augusto didn't leave. Quite the opposite. He moved into Anselmo's inn and started working the town, spreading his version of the story. He claimed Helena was unstable, dangerous, that she'd neglected her own child to death. He said he, as a betrayed husband and grieving father, had come to seek justice. The town, always eager for drama, lapped it up. Mrs. Inez organized a meeting at the rectory. Father Simon, Jacinto, some shopkeepers, and farmers attended. The goal, to decide what to do about Helena. "She's a threat," Jacinto said. "Always has been, and now we know why. A woman who lets her own child die doesn't deserve to live among us," Mrs. Inez agreed. "But we don't know the whole truth," Mrs. Marta mused, present at the meeting. "We've only heard one side." "The husband's side," the priest countered. "A man of respect." "Respect?" Mrs. Marta narrowed her eyes. He shows up out of nowhere with no proof, and you just believe him. And what do you propose? Jacinto asked. That we ignore it? I propose we hear the young woman out, Mrs. Marta said, but her voice was in the minority. The next morning, Jacinto, accompanied by 2 men, went to Helena's shack. They pounded on the door. Get out, Jacinto yelled. You're not welcome here anymore. Inside, Helena trembled. Tom, who was at a nearby farm, heard the commotion and ran. When he arrived, he saw Helena being dragged out of the shack. She tried to resist, but the men were strong. Let her go, Tom shouted, shoving one of the men. Don't interfere, Tom, Jacinto warned. She's leaving today. She's not going anywhere, Tom said, placing himself in front of Helena. You're defending a murderer, Jacinto asked, incredulous. I'm defending an innocent woman, Tom corrected. And if you touch her again, you'll have to deal with me. The tension in the air was palpable. Jacinto sized up Tom. He knew the man, knew he didn't back down easily. You're digging your own grave, Jacinto said, but have it your way. They backed off, but before leaving, Jacinto pointed at Tom. There's a meeting in the town square tomorrow. Everyone will be there, and we'll decide her future. If you're a man of honor, you'll be there. Tom nodded. I will, and I'll prove you all wrong. They've already decided I'll have to leave. No, Tom said firmly. We'll fight. How? She asked desperately. They believe him. I'm just a poor woman with no name, no nothing. Tom took her hands. You're not alone, he said, and I'll make them understand that. How? He took a deep breath. By marrying you. Helena's eyes widened. What? If we get married, Tom explained, you'll have protection. You'll have a name. You'll have a place. They won't be able to drive you out. But this is crazy, Helena murmured. You barely know me. I have a terrible past. You're the woman who took care of me when I was sick, Tom interrupted. Who works hard, who doesn't give up, who sings when she's scared. I know you well enough, she cried. But what if you regret it? I won't, he said, confident. And even if it was just on paper, even if it was just to protect you, I'd do it. Because you deserve it. Helena couldn't speak. She just nodded, trembling. And that night they both understood they were about to cross a line of no return, but they were willing to cross it together. Tom didn't sleep that night. As soon as the sun broke the horizon, he went to Mrs. Marta's house. I need your help, he said. Mrs. Marta, still in her robe, crossed her arms. I'm already helping, my boy. But tell me what else you need. I want to marry Helena. Tomorrow before the meeting in the square, but I need witnesses. Mrs. Marta raised her eyebrows. Marry? Tom. Are you sure? I am, he replied without hesitation. She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Then I'll help you. And I know who else can help us too. Rosa, a laundress who knew Helena and knew about her honest work. And there was young Father Claudio, who had recently arrived in town to assist Father Simon, and who had a more compassionate view of faith. You're asking me to officiate a rushed wedding, Father Claudio said hesitantly, without banns, without preparation. I'm asking you to do what Jesus would do, Tom said. Protect the wronged. The young priest looked at Helena, who stood beside Tom, pale but with her head held high. Do you accept this marriage? He asked her. Of your own free will? I do, Helena replied firmly. Father Claudio sighed. Then God help us. I will officiate. Father Michael opened the prayer book and began the ceremony. His voice, young but steady, echoed through the stone walls. Thomas Ferreira, do you take Helena as your wife, to love and to honor, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Thomas said, looking directly at Helena. Helena, the priest continued, do you take Thomas as your husband, to love and to honor in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? She felt tears stream down her face. I do. Father Michael smiled. Then, before God and these witnesses, I now pronounce you husband and wife. There was no kiss, just a handshake. Firm, warm, laden with silent promises. A few hours later, the town square was packed. Jacinto, Augusto, Mrs. Inez, Father Simon, and dozens of townsfolk waited for the meeting. When Thomas and Helena arrived hand in hand, a murmur swept through the crowd. "What is this?" Jacinto demanded, his voice tight with irritation. "This," Thomas said, raising Helena's left hand where a simple tin ring shone, "is my wife." The silence was deafening. "You got married?" Augusto asked, incredulous. "We did," Thomas confirmed. "This morning in the chapel, with Father Michael and witnesses. Everything done according to law and faith." Augusto stepped forward. "This is a sham. She's my wife." "She was," Father Michael corrected, appearing from the crowd. "Your marriage was annulled years ago due to proven abandonment. I've checked the parish records from where you both came. You drove her out, Augusto, and you never looked for her again. Before the church and the law, Helena was free." Augusto paled. "But she's a murderer." "She's a mother who lost a child to illness," said Mrs. Marta, stepping forward. "I spoke with midwives in other towns. Miguel was born frail, with weak lungs. There was nothing she could have done. And she's worked honestly since she got here," added Mrs. Rosa. "I've seen it, everyone has." The tide was turning. "She's my wife now," Thomas stated firmly, "and no one will touch her. If anyone has a problem with that, you can come talk to me." Jacinto and Augusto exchanged glances. They knew the battle was lost. "This isn't over," Augusto growled before stomping away, but he was gone, and he didn't come back. The victory in the square didn't bring immediate peace. The village remained divided. Half supported Thomas and Helena. The other half still viewed them with suspicion. But for the couple, that no longer mattered. They had become a unit, a mutual sanctuary against the world. 2 weeks after the wedding, a devastating storm hit the region. The sky darkened suddenly, and within minutes, rain began to fall with fury. The river that cut through the village, normally placid, began to rise. Thomas was in the fields when he heard the screams. He ran to the road and saw it. The wooden bridge connecting the village to the neighboring district was about to give way. And on the other side, a child, Mrs. Rosa's daughter, was trapped, clinging to a tree, surrounded by the rising water. "Someone has to go get her," Mrs. Rosa cried, desperate. The men hesitated. The current was violent. The bridge swayed precariously. Thomas looked at Helena. She nodded without a word. He ran for the bridge. Helena followed. "What are you doing?" Thomas yelled. "I'm coming with you," she replied. "It's dangerous." "I know," Helena shouted. "But I'm not letting you go alone." Together, they crossed the swaying bridge. The planks groaned. The water lapped at their ankles. When they reached the other side, Thomas held the child, while Helena tied a rope to the tree to ensure they could get back. The return journey was terrifying. The bridge began to splinter. Thomas carried the girl, Helena held the rope, guiding them. When the last plank gave way, they made a final leap and fell onto the other side, soaked, breathless, but alive. Mrs. Rosa hugged her daughter, weeping. Other villagers approached, stunned. "They saved her," someone murmured. "Risked their own lives," said another. And in that moment, something shifted. The village saw, with their own eyes, the courage and character of that couple. That night, in the house that was now theirs, Thomas and Helena sat by the fire. They were exhausted, but at peace. "We almost died," Helena said, a sad smile touching her lips. "Almost," Thomas agreed. "But we didn't." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For making me believe that life can still be good." Thomas kissed the top of her head. "Life was always good, Helena. We just forget it sometimes." The months that followed brought a transformation. The farm, once lonely, now hummed with life. Helena planted flowers in front of the house. Calendula, wild roses, sunflowers. Thomas built a new fence, stronger, more beautiful. The vegetable garden flourished, the chickens laid more eggs, the cow had a calf, and the village slowly learned to respect. One spring morning, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She sat on the porch, holding her still flat stomach, and cried. But this time, they were tears of joy mixed with fear. Thomas found her there and knelt in front of her. "What is it?" he asked, concerned. "I'm expecting a baby," she said, her voice trembling. Thomas's eyes widened. Then he smiled, a wide, genuine smile, the first Helena had seen of that magnitude from him. "A baby," he repeated, incredulous. "Our baby." "Aren't you scared?" Helena asked. "I am," Thomas admitted. "But I'm happy too, because I know that together we'll manage." She threw herself into his arms, and they held each other as the sun rose in the sky. The birth happened on a quiet summer night. Mrs. Marta attended, and when the baby, a healthy boy with strong lungs, let out his first cry, Helena wept with relief and gratitude. Thomas held his son, marveling. "What will we name him?" Helena asked, exhausted but radiant. "Miguel," Thomas said, looking at her, "in memory of your first son. So he knows he wasn't forgotten." Helena sobbed, but nodded. "Miguel," she repeated. "It's perfect." She saw the flowers she'd planted, the fence he'd fixed, the sun they'd had together, and she realized the scars were still there. They always would be, but they didn't hurt anymore. They had transformed into a testament, proof that even in the darkest moments, life finds a way to bloom. Tom saw her looking and walked over to her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come," Helena replied, smiling. Tom took her hand. "And how much we still have ahead of us." She rested her head on his shoulder. "It's home now," she whispered. "It always was," Tom answered, "from the day you stayed." And there, under the blue sky and warm sun, they both understood that true love isn't about erasing pain. It's about transforming it into strength, into roots, into bloom. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to get new stories every day. What would you do in their shoes? Comment and share with someone special.